So far, we have stores and we have users, but we don't have any way to sort of connect the two. And essentially, when we're creating a store, we need to be able to set an author property on our stores that is linked to one of the users in our database. That's what's called a relationship. And this is how we're going to create a relationship in MongoDB. So, what we do is we're going to open up our store model here. So, store.js. And we're going to scroll down to the bottom where it says photo string. And we're going to add a new field called an author. And the author is going to be an object. The type of the author is not going to be a string. It's not going to be a number. It's actually going to be an object ID. Interesting. Well, let's look at our users here. And we look at our documents here. You're going to see that the ID of a person is not a string as we have here. It's not a date as we have here. It's not a number. It's not anything else that we've used. The ID is actually its own type. And you see that it's actually a type called an object ID. And that's what we want to set the author to be because it's going to be a relationship between the store and the actual user. So the type is going to be mongoose.S schema. And then we say object ID. So that's a custom type that we have here. And then we say the ref is going to be user. So this is where we tell MongoDB in our schema that the author is going to be referenced to our user. Let's open that up real quick. User.js. We scroll down here. You see that the user is right here with a capital U user. The model is called that. So we're telling it this is going to be an object. But when somebody gives us an object ID, we're going to store just the object and it's going to be referenced to the actual user. So we're going to be able to come back and populate the author of each of our stores without having to save all the data about myself. We just simply have like a pointer arrow to another piece of data, another document, which is going to be Wes or whatever is on there. And then finally, we can make this required, which is say you must supply an author. And in our case, it's always going to be passed because we're going to do it as we save a store. So we'll give that a save now. Then when we create a store here, it actually needs to have an author associated with it. So let's open up our store controller. And let's go to our create store method. Here we go, exports.createStore. And what we're going to do before we even create the store, we're just going to say request.body.author, because that's the new field that we're working with, is equal to. Now, how do we get the current user's ID? Well, request.user._ID. And what that will do is it will take the ID of the currently logged in user, that's going to put it into the author field. And now when we actually create a store, what's going to happen is that we will be able to populate that data. So give that a save. Let's try and log in here. We're going to create a new store real quick. So we just went ahead and created our new store. Now, if we look that up in our MongoDB here, go to stores, and we scroll down all the way to the bottom, you say new store. You'll see that the author is object ID 58F4D5. And if we go back to our users, you'll see that Wes Boss is 58F4D5. So the object ID is now our relationship between the two. And what we're able to do, if we go to store.pug, and we just do a quick dump of the store somewhere, so pre equals h.dump store, you see that the author property comes along with us, but it's just an actual ID. Now, if we were to do something called a populate, what it will do is it will bring along all the information about that author and put it in here. It's going to replace it with the actual author data. So let's find our store controller. Let's go to where we get a store, which is going to be get store by slug. And in here, we're doing store.findOne. And if you do .populate on the end and you ask it to populate the author field, just by adding that populate on the end, it should then say, oh, this field needs to be populated. So let me go off and find the actual document that's associated with this ID rather than just giving them the ID. So if I refresh now, Aha, there we go. We have our author with an ID, an email, a name, and then we also see the password token stuff just because I requested a reset and I actually didn't reset my password. If I did, those would be deleted, no problem. So if you need to populate some fields, you simply just say .populate on the end, and it will go off and find the associated document for that person and fill it in for you. So that's really nice because we have one document here. We only have to find one store, but by calling populate, it will fill in the additional data that we need. Good. So in this case, I don't necessarily need it. And you should also be careful that you're not accidentally leaking any of your users' sensitive data. You'll see that the password and the hash and the salt, none of that stuff is automatically populated because it's sensitive information. But sometimes you do need the email. Other times you shouldn't be printing it out. So that's our first part right here. The second part is we need to be able to stop people from editing stores which they do not own. So where do we have let's go to here's our edit store layout. What we need to do right here is before they can actually edit the store, we need to confirm that they are the actual owner. So what we'll do is maybe right above this edit store, we'll make a new function here. We'll call it confirm owner. So say const confirm owner equals, it's a function that takes in a store and takes in a user. It's going to check if the user and the store are the same thing. So we'll say if there is store.author.equals. So equals is a method that comes along. Why? Because the store.author is going to be an object ID. And in order to compare an object ID with an actual string, you need to use the .equals method that lives inside of it. We check if it's equal to the user.id. And in this case, we're checking for not. That's what the bang. So if the store author is not equal to the user ID, then we are just going to throw an error that says you must own a store in order to edit it. So in this case, we are going to not be doing this as middleware because we actually need to find the store before we can do a check. So what we're doing here is we are making a function called confirm owner. And before we actually render it out, but after we have found the store, which is what we have this to do here, we're just going to run that function, confirm owner, and we're going to pass it the store, and we're going to pass it the current owner, or the current user, which is request.user. And what this will do is if they are the owner, then it's going to just keep going. If they are not, it's going to throw an error, which hopefully means that our error handling middleware will pick up this actual error from happening. So give it a refresh. I'm going to go back to my thing right here. I'm going to find the only one that has an author is this new store right here. And if I click on edit, it lets me edit it, no problem. But let's go to one of these stores that doesn't have an author, coffee shop. It tells me, oh, in this case, we actually hit an error altogether because we sort of have incomplete data because some stores don't have authors because they were created before we actually had some users. So what we have to do now is go to our actual MongoDB database, go to our stores, and we need to delete everything that doesn't have an actual author. So real quick, I'm just going to super speed delete them all except for that one that we just made. You should do this too. Make sure you hit refresh a couple times on here to make sure that you only have your new store. This may be solved by the time you're viewing this, but it does seem that if you delete things, it doesn't actually delete it sometimes. Bit of a bug in the software right now. So if we go back to our homepage, you should just see one store. Now I'm going to log out and I'm going to register under a new email address. So I'll say Randy, and I'll say wesboss plus randy@gmail.com. That's another way that you can make a fake email address here. The password is going to be Wes. Good, register. I'm logged in. I'm going to now create a new store, which is going to be Randy's Joint. Good, BBQ. Upload a nice little file here. Let's see, Randy's Donuts, Inglewood, California. Sounds like a nice place. And save. Good. So we've created two joints now. We've got Randy's Joints in the new store. I shouldn't be able to edit new store because I did not create that. Again, I'm logged in as Randy right now. So edit it. There we go. You must own a store to edit it, right? And all we did there is throw the error, and it shows us here. We could have also have flashed an error and redirected them. But in this case, I just threw the actual error and it will bring us to that error message right here. Otherwise, I should be able to edit this one because I made it. And there we go. I can see it. So let's update our interface real quick. I shouldn't be able to see this pencil icon right here. I should only see the pencil icon if I actually own the store. So let's open up our store card.pug, and you see that we have these three lines right here where we have the edit. Right above it, we're going to say if, and we're going to say store.author.equals the user._ID, then we are going to go ahead and show it. Now, previously I said store.author.id equals, but in this case, it's just store.author.equals. Why is that? Well, in this case, we're not actually populating the author because we don't need the author in this case. All we need is just the ID of the author. So you generally only want to populate fields if you actually need them for each of the stores. Otherwise, in this case, we're just going to be seeing the ID. And if that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you, you can just do a quick pre equals h.dump where we take the store, and you'll see, or we can just show the store.author. And you'll see in this case, it's just an ID. It's not the actual whole populated author because we don't need the author in this view. So we're using store.author.equals user ID. One problem, this works fine. See, I see edit under Randy, but not under this one. If I were to open this in an incognito, you see that we get an error. And the problem is, well, let's take a quick look at it, what it's telling us. Cannot read property ID of null. So it's trying to find ID of something that doesn't exist, user. And that's because you're not logged in at this point. This is just a regular person browsing this website. So if there is no user, there obviously is going to be no ID property. So what we need to do is check first if there's a user. So if user and store.author. So if this is false, it's not going to try to evaluate this part. So we first check if there's a user. And if there is, we're going to check if the store author is equal to the user ID. So you always need to make sure that you catch little edge cases like that because logged in and logged out states can be different. Give that a refresh. There we go. This person can't edit anything because they're not logged in. But here I'm on Randy's joint. If I do a quick log out and log in, now I'm able to edit this one because that's the one I had previously made. And I'm not able to edit Randy's joint because I am not able to edit that. So it's like very basic permissions. What you could also do, and I've done this previously, is you have different levels. So like a level 1 would be able like an admin, and a level 2 would be an editor, or I do like a level 10 and a level 20 just so I have some room in between in case I want to make like a in between like admin editor where they have some features and not. And then what you could do at this point is you could create additional confirm owner. You could say if the store author equals user ID or the user.level is greater or less than 10. And then you say if they are like an admin, then anyone can actually go ahead and edit it. So you can really make that a lot more complicated if you need to have admin and different types of users. But in this case, we're going to stick to just being able, the person that created it is the only one that would be able to actually edit it. So I'll delete this. So now we've locked down both the interface, being able to edit it, as well as confirm that the person is an owner once they try to actually edit and update an actual store. Let's move on to our next piece of this application, which is working and building with an API.